Yesterday in our Wonderful Day in the Lord broadcast, we looked at Acts chapter 16 and verses 28 and through 31 that talked to us about the issue of the command of guarding the flock of Christ. So we're looking at commands in this little series that the Lord has given us, and He commands the leaders of the local church, people He calls overseers and elders and pastors in the New Testament, to guard the flock. This office of elder, overseer, pastor is one office. We often think of pastors as full-time ministers hired by the church to pastor the church, and often that's true. But there are other leaders in the local church who take on the role of elders and overseers who are responsible for the flock. So it's not just full-time paid individuals. It's the leaders of a local church. They are commissioned by God to guard the flock. Now we move on to verse 31 and 32 and look at the more positive flow here as to how does the eldership, how does the leaders of a church truly guard the flock against false teachers? And we do it primarily by teaching truth. So look at verse 31. Paul says, "Therefore, be watchful, remembering that night and day for a period of 3 years I did not cease to admonish each one with tears." So Paul is coming off this former command of guarding the flock, saying that I've guarded you and I've taken care of you for 3 years, night and day, admonishing each of you with tears. Very passionate, very concerned for this church that he spent 3 years in. And no other church did he spend that long ministering to. So 3 years of ministering to this church, and he did it with great concern and great passion. Now he commends them. Now we're moving to another command to church leadership. He says in verse 32, "Now I commend you to God." He's talking to the elders at the church of Ephesus, and he commends them to God and to the word of His grace, which is able to build you up and to give you the inheritance among all those who have been sanctified. So here's the next command. He commends these individuals to God and the word of His grace that builds up the local church. So I think the positive side of this negative command that he starts with, the negative command to guard or to watch over the flock, is to build them up in the word of grace. So primarily we do not build up and protect the flock, by warning only. We do warn. There are times we need to warn against particular false isms that are out there, and there are multitudes today. So there are times that we need to warn about particular groups or teachings, and that's part of the ministry of guarding the sheep. But primarily we protect the flock by teaching the truth, by giving the word of grace to people. That is what builds people up. There are many things the church does, and many of these things are extremely valuable. But the primary means of building up the flock, building up the people of God, is the teaching of the word of grace, is teaching the New Testament teachings that God gives us to build up that flock. So he commends them. He says, I want you to take that word. I want you to build up God's people. I want you to do that by the word of grace that the Lord has given them to set them apart for the work of God. So this is the command. This is a twofold command. Yesterday we looked at the command of guarding the flock, watching over them because there are dangers out there, spiritual dangers of false teachers, dangers of sin, dangers of all sorts that God's people must be guarded from. But the positive flow here is that we do that by the teaching of God's word so that they know the difference between falseness and truth. As has often been said, the financial world, such as the banking world, the Treasury Department, wants their people to know the difference between counterfeit currency and true currency. They don't teach the people about all the counterfeits. They teach them to be able to identify the true currency. And that's what we have here in the New Testament. If we know the truth, if we know God's word, it builds us up so that when the falsehoods come along, we know the counterfeits and we're protected from it. So here's our next command to the leaders of the church: build up the flock through the teaching of God's word. Tomorrow we'll move to the epistles, and begin to look at some of those commands found in the New Testament epistles that are identified as for us today. So we'll take a look at that tomorrow.